A president, hailed for vigor and vision, facing the world's flashpoints, yet behind closed doors a private physician is caught crossing White House thresholds 34 times, his unlicensed lab pushing nearly 30 pounds of amphetamine into secret vials. What power demanded a hidden chemical edge at the highest office? The evidence runs deeper than rumor, and the trail, once followed, asks, who really kept America's leader running while the nation was kept in the dark? A photograph captures a leather doctor's bag, half open on a White House couch. The image is stark, but the trail behind it is anything but clear. No official archive lists this bag as property of the president or his staff. No bill of sale, no accession tag, no inventory slip ties it to the heart of power. Researchers combed through White House storage manifests, estate sales, and even private collections, but nothing surfaces that links a single artifact to the president's inner circle. The bag's supposed contents, syringes and a vial with a bleeding red label, exist only in shadows, not in catalogue entries or documented seizures. Even the most meticulous archivists found no mention in visitor logs or medical supply receipts. The object becomes a cipher. If it ever passed through the West Wing, it left no official trace. Every attempt to anchor it in the record hits a dead end. No chain of custody, no forensic tag, no photograph with verifiable metadata. The absence speaks louder than any label. In a building where every pen and paperclip is logged, this bag floats outside the paperwork, immune to bureaucracy. Its existence is suggested by whispered recollections and gaps in the files, but the paper trail stops cold. What remains is a question. Who shepherded this kit through the world's most scrutinized address, and why does its path vanish the moment it crosses the threshold? Max Jacobson's reputation followed him like a shadow, never officially on staff, never bound by the rules that governed the White House medical unit. He arrived with a promise, relief, energy, and the kind of stamina that could outlast any rival. The secret was always in the syringe. Jacobson's formula was no simple vitamin shot. At its core, it held amphetamines, methamphetamine according to procurement records, measured out in doses that would make a pharmacist blanch. New York State investigators later calculated he purchased nearly 30 pounds of amphetamines over 5 years, enough for 100,000 injections annually. The rest of the cocktail was a moving target: steroids for inflammation and pain, procaine to numb, B vitamins for show, and a rotating cast of hormones, animal extracts, even placental tissue. Each vial was mixed in the back room of an unlicensed lab, labeled with whatever story the patient needed to hear. The doses Jacobson gave Kennedy were not conservative. Staff testimony and pharmacy math point to injections of 25 milligrams or more of methamphetamine at a time, well above any therapeutic range. For a president already on a daily regimen of steroids, painkillers, and barbiturates, the risks multiplied. The stimulant-steroid combination could spark mood swings, insomnia, spikes in blood pressure, or worse. But the effects were immediate: energy, clarity, the illusion of invincibility. Jacobson's access was absolute. No prescription pad, no oversight, just a handshake and a promise to keep the president on his feet. In the margins of the record, the real substance of the crime comes into focus: a leader's body, managed by an outsider's chemistry, hidden behind a wall of silence. The next step is the lab. If the bag and its contents ever surface, the evidence does not rest on stories or shadows. It rests on the chemistry. Forensic teams would start with the basics: residue analysis on glass, metal and rubber, hunting for traces left behind by whatever the syringe once delivered. Gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, GCMS, can break a drop of dried fluid into a chemical fingerprint. Amphetamines, steroids, procaine, Even the ghosts of hormones or animal extracts each leaves a molecular trail. If the label is still clinging to the vial, ink spectroscopy could date the pigment, show whether that red smear was laid down in the right decade, or if someone tried to fake the past. Paper fibers and adhesives offer their own timeline, matching or not matching the era of Kennedy's presidency. Metal composition in the needles, glass formulation in the vial, each feature can be read against manufacturing records from the late 1950s and early 1960s. Every test is double-blind, every chain of custody logged, because one contaminated sample or a single misplaced tag can collapse the whole case. The standard is strict. Nothing is taken on trust, not even a shadow in a photograph. If the evidence is there, science will find it. If it isn't, the story ends at the lab bench. In a world built on secrets, the only truth that matters is the one that survives the microscope and the spectrometer. A name like Max Jacobson never showed up on the official guest lists. The real record-keeping happened behind closed doors, in ledgers no outsider was meant to see. 34 visits, each one a risk, each one coded. The Secret Service logs didn't print his name in black and white, not the way they did for dignitaries or cabinet men. Instead, Jacobson became a number, a signal, a quiet phone call routed through the switchboard with a phrase only insiders understood. Kennedy would say, "Mrs. Dunn," and the operator would know to connect the call to Jacobson's New York office. The code kept outsiders guessing, and it kept the paper trail clean. The ledgers themselves were a study in omission. Where routine visitors left a string of signatures, Jacobson's entries were sparse, just a time, sometimes only a set of initials, sometimes nothing at all. Official logs recorded his presence at the White House 34 times by the spring of 1962, but the details stopped there. No mention of what happened behind closed doors, no hint of the vials or the syringes. The logs were designed to document, but in this case they concealed. Phone protocols followed the same pattern. A call would come in routed through the main switchboard, but the record would show only a generic notation, never a name. The system was meant to keep track, but it also provided cover. The mechanics of secrecy ran deeper than missing names. Aides learned to look the other way. When Jacobson arrived, he was ushered in through side doors, his bag never searched, his visits never questioned. The exchange was simple, access for results, no questions asked. The logs became a shield, not a record. Even the doctors on staff, the ones who should have been in charge, found themselves locked out of the loop. Later, when Dr. Hans Kraus began to push back, he found the evidence thin, just a string of unexplained visits, a pattern of calls, and a president who always seemed to bounce back, no matter how late the hour. The proof was in the numbers, the codes, and the silence that followed every entry. In a building obsessed with documentation, the most important transactions left barely a trace. 34 visits, each one hidden in plain sight, each one a lesson in how secrecy works when the stakes are too high for paperwork. Hans Kraus was not a man easily rattled. By the spring of 1962, he had seen enough. The president's official medical team, already wary of outsiders, found themselves shut out by a private operator whose methods belonged more to the back alleys of Manhattan than the halls of American power. Kraus kept his own notes, watched the president's mood swing from wired euphoria to exhaustion, and counted the unexplained recoveries after late-night visits from a doctor no one could officially name. The pattern was clear. Kennedy's stamina did not come from rest or routine medicine. It came from a needle and a promise. Kraus confronted the president directly. He did not mince words. He told Kennedy, "No president with his finger on the red button has any business taking stuff like that." The warning cut through the haze of secrecy and bravado. Krauss was respected, a world-class orthopedic surgeon, hand-picked for his discretion and skill. But he was also a man of principle, and he had reached his limit. The confrontation was not just about medical ethics. It was about control. Jacobson's injections were unregulated, their contents a mystery, even to the president's closest advisors. Krauss saw the risk. A leader already weakened by chronic pain and disease was now dependent on a chemical fix from a man who answered to no one. The stakes were national, not personal. If the wrong dose hit at the wrong time, the consequences would not be private, they could be global. Krauss delivered an ultimatum: Jacobson's access would end or Krauss would walk. There would be no more secret visits, no more mystery vials, no more backroom deals. The message landed. By mid-1962, Jacobson was effectively banned from the White House. His name vanished from the logs, the few that existed. The president's circle closed ranks, and official medicine took over. The era of the outsider was finished, at least on paper. But the damage had already been done. The line between medicine and manipulation had blurred, and the cost of secrecy was now measured in trust, not just in health. Pain shaped the president's days before policy ever did. John F. Kennedy's back was a constant battlefield. Scar tissue from failed surgeries, vertebrae fused and fragile, pain that radiated down his legs and left him struggling to stand after long meetings. Official medical files, when they mention it at all, speak in code, listing discomfort, muscle spasm, fatigue. The reality was a man who sometimes needed 2 canes just to cross the room, who wore a stiff brace under his suit, who braced himself against the desk when the cameras rolled. The White House physician tracked flare-ups in private notes. Procaine injections 2 or 3 times a day, heat packs, stretching routines that offered little relief. Steroids kept his adrenal system from collapsing, but they came with their own price: mood swings, insomnia, a body that never quite felt steady. In rare moments behind closed doors, Kennedy dropped the mask. He told one doctor he would rather have a short life full of fun than a long one spent in pain. The calculation was always there, risk traded for the chance to feel normal, if only for a few hours. The need for chemical rescue was not about chasing a high, but about escaping the grind of pain that never let up. When the pressure mounted, a summit, a crisis, a stretch of endless speeches, he reached for whatever solution kept him upright. Each injection was a gamble, but the alternative was weakness, visible to enemies and voters alike. In a world that demanded stamina, the real cost was admitting how much it hurt just to keep going. June 3rd, 1961. The president's plane touched down in Vienna, carrying more than diplomats and briefing books. In the shadows of the entourage, Max Jacobson arrived with his medical kit, ready, as always, for a private call. The summit with Khrushchev was set to begin within hours. Kennedy, already battered by weeks of travel and chronic pain, faced the Soviet leader under the glare of a world waiting for any sign of weakness. Jacobson's presence was not marked on the official schedule. No press release mentioned the doctor's arrival, no staff memo detailed the contents of his bag. But the pattern was familiar. When the stakes rose, so did the need for chemical intervention. Accounts from the period point to a last-minute injection before Kennedy stepped into the palace. The same kind of amphetamine-laced cocktail Jacobson had given him in New York, Paris, and the White House. The shot promised energy, focus, and the edge needed to project strength to an adversary who would exploit any hesitation. Historians later reconstructed the scene from fragments, travel records, expense accounts, and staff recollections. They found Jacobson's name linked to the Vienna trip, his methods consistent, his access unchecked. The summit became a test, not just of policy, but of chemistry. As Kennedy shook hands with Khrushchev, the world saw a confident leader. Behind the scenes, the reality was more complicated. A body running on borrowed stamina, a mind sharpened and sped by a doctor who answered to no one. When the cameras clicked, the margin for error was chemical, and the cost of concealment was measured in risk, not just reputation. In 1975, the New York State Board of Regents handed down its final judgment on Max Jacobson. The verdict was blunt. His medical license was revoked, his practice condemned. The board's findings read like a criminal charge sheet: amphetamines dispensed by the pound, vials mixed in an unlicensed lab, injections tainted with filthy, putrid, or decomposed substances. The evidence was not just about reckless dosing or secret formulas. It was about the basic duty of care abandoned. Pharmacy records tracked nearly 30 pounds of amphetamines purchased over 5 years, enough for more than 100,000 shots a year. Investigators found no safeguards, no documentation, just a steady flow of controlled drugs and mystery compounds to whoever had the money or the influence to demand them. The decision stripped Jacobson of his right to practice medicine in New York. His name was struck from the rolls, his reputation left to rot in the same files that catalogued his violations. For the board, the case was closed. The official record stands in black and white, a doctor found unfit by his peers, his methods condemned not as innovation, but as malpractice. Medical ethicists look at the Kennedy-Jacobson affair and see a void where accountability should have been. No statute requires the president to disclose what drugs he takes or who administers them. There is no constitutional mechanism to force transparency about the commander-in-chief's medical regimen, even when it might affect the fate of the country. In the early 1960s, no outside body reviewed the credentials of a doctor with access to the Oval Office, or questioned what went into a syringe marked as vitamins. The only oversight came from within, a circle of aides and physicians who often prioritized loyalty and secrecy over the public's right to know. Ethics professors point to other democracies where heads of state submit to regular health disclosures and third-party review. In the United States, the president's body remains a private matter, shielded from scrutiny by tradition and political calculation. The risks are not just personal. When oversight fails, the line between medical care and manipulation blurs. The lesson, say the ethicists, is simple. A democracy that trusts its leader with unchecked power over nuclear weapons should not trust him alone with the contents of a doctor's bag. The cost of secrecy is paid in uncertainty, and the bill never comes due until it's too late. Today, presidential health remains a classified battlefield. Executive privilege still shields medical records from public view. Secrecy outlives the scandals it protects. When power meets vulnerability, the urge to mask weakness is as strong now as it was then. The real risk is not exposure. It is what remains hidden inside the room where decisions are made. What else stays behind closed doors? Share your thoughts below.